Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And in today's episode, I'm talking with Glenice Buck from Glenice Buck Designs. Glenice does garden design, maintenance, and tree consultations. And she's based in Young in New South Wales and previously was in Sydney before that. And the amount of information that she shares on her Instagram page and the website, and she's also got a newsletter that she puts out, is just insane. There's so much on there. Like, I was researching it before chatting with her and couldn't believe the amount of information there was. So well worth checking that out if you're interested in gardens and plants, because she's a bit of a plant nerd, as she said herself. And it's no surprise that she knew when she was 7 or 8 years old that she wanted to do garden design. And then she was pretty lucky with where she started working at a nursery. So the nursery did growing and selling of plants, landscape design, and also landscape construction. So she was working there for 9 years and got a good, well-rounded knowledge from doing that before starting her own business. Glenice has also got a few ebooks that she's done recently, and she also does garden coaching consultations. So there's some, again, if she doesn't got the information on the website, she'll share it directly. So it's great to see that. And also in this chat, we talk about how her gardens are designed for the spaces. So I wasn't aware where she was living, but I saw on her website, I was looking at her and the Instagram, looking at the gardens that she was doing, and they look rural and country. And then turns out that is exactly where she lives. So it's a great example of designing gardens for the space that they're in rather than just designing a garden no matter where it is. So there'll be plenty of good bits in this chat with Glenice. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Glenice Buck. Glenice, thank you very much for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. My first question for you is, how did you start in the industry?
Well, I actually decided when I was about, I think, 7 or 8 that I wanted to become a landscape designer. So unfortunately, it kind of worked out. Like, I really love doing what I do. So, but I had to do an assignment on, I think it was like year 3. I had to do an assignment about, the whole class had to do an assignment about what we wanted to do when we grew up. What was our career choice? And I said to my mum, "Oh, what do you call somebody that draws gardens, like lays them out?" Because I always loved helping out in the garden with mum and dad. And mum goes, "Oh, garden designer," just sort of not really thinking about it. And I stuck with that. I was probably the only person in my whole group of friends that knew from that, like, I was really focused. That was what I was going to do. So yeah, right through high school, I was really focused on doing landscape architecture at New South Wales University. But then I actually went to the open day at Ryde TAFE, which is a horticulture college in Sydney. And I just fell in love with the campus and just thought, and the teachers were fabulous. And it just meant I could actually work whilst studying too. So it was still for like 4 years. I could do like a 12-hour day, get all the study done in one day, and then work the other sort of 4 or 5 days of the week. So so I ended up doing landscape design at TAFE, and yeah, that's just, I guess, fortunately worked out.
Right. So what happened after that? Did you then start working for yourself, or did you go and work for someone else?
No, I got a job. I think it was about 6 months after I started the course. I was going to every single like nursery garden centre in Sydney, all over like every area. And I just got a job working in a retail nursery in Double Bay in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. It was just a really cute little nursery, but the company actually had a landscape design section, landscape construction, garden maintenance, and they also had a wholesale growing property too. So I was there for 9 years, and I got to be involved with every section of the business. I really enjoyed every part of it. And yeah, so after about 9 years, I thought, no, it's time to go out on my own. My dad just said, just do it. I was thinking about, I think it took me 2 years to make the decision. And I went out on my own and I started just doing garden maintenance and also landscape design. So the garden maintenance was sort of like the bread and butter sort of money to keep my design side going as I built it up. And yeah, I was really lucky. A lot of my clients that I'd done design work for with the previous company found me and gave me work. So that got the garden maintenance side up and running pretty quick. And yeah, so I've had my own business since 2006. And then, yeah, we moved down to about 7 years ago, we moved down here to Young, which is 4 hours south of Sydney, or southwest of Sydney. And yeah, set up I was still going back to Sydney doing garden maintenance and doing my design and tree consulting work. But when I was on maternity leave, I just made the decision I had to kind of cut those trips back to Sydney out. It wasn't going to work with a newborn. And yeah, so I just mainly focused on doing landscape design and tree consulting work. And I'd still go back up to Sydney like once every 6 weeks. I've got a lot of architects, other landscape designers, landscape architects, developers that I do a lot of my tree consulting work for. So yeah, so that sort of kept the business going. I guess I was probably only working maybe 3-4 days a week when our son was quite young. And then about 2 years ago, my husband decided he wanted to change, and we'd always talked about doing garden maintenance together. And I wanted to reintroduce garden maintenance, but I just thought I couldn't really do it with juggling childcare and everything on my own. And I wasn't really keen about getting employees. So yeah, so Phil joined the business 2 years ago. And so now we're back doing garden maintenance, and I'm still doing my design and tree consulting work too. So.
Cool. What was Phil doing before that?
He's a bit of a jack of all trades. He's a qualified butcher. He's worked in the construction industry for 8-9 years. And then he, just before we started the business, he'd actually gone back to TAFE and studied work health and safety. And he was working for a company down here as their work health and safety officer. But the ownership of that company changed over, and he just wasn't happy with the way that everything was running there, and he wanted to change. And he's always loved gardens. I've always dragged him into helping me out. And he's always had a nice garden. So yeah, so he just found a new career.
Very nice. And what's the population of young like?
Well, the total region's about 20,000 people. So that includes 3 townships of Young, Harden and Burrawa, and then the farms in between as well.
Yep.
It's not huge.
Yeah, I saw one of the projects you worked on. I don't know how long ago it was, but it was Coolac. And I remember driving through there because one of my employees is from Colac in Victoria. And I assume that Coolac is the cooler version of Colac.
Yeah. I'm constantly getting corrected on how to say it with local.
Yeah. I don't know if I say it properly, but
I never know. But yeah, I've actually started saying Gundagai, so I don't get corrected.
So you're now still doing the occasional trip like every 6 weeks, and then back to Sydney to do it?
Yeah, I've got one. So when I went on maternity leave, I had to give up all my garden maintenance jobs in Sydney, and I sort of handed them over to a few different contractors that I had worked in with. But I have kept one commercial job in Sydney, so that needs to get done every 6 weeks. So we go back up for that. And then normally what I do with my consulting, the tree consulting and design work, I know the date. So if I can tell the client I'm coming up on that date, they're usually happy to wait. So unless it's an emergency tree work job. But I've got other friends that work in the industry that I can refer those jobs to. So it works out quite well. It's good. I quite enjoy getting back to Sydney to catch up with friends, although I love the country now too. So
what do? Do you drive up early in the morning and then come back the same day?
We actually try to tie it in on a weekend. So for this commercial job, it's actually better to get out there on a weekend because there's nobody in the car park. So you can get really good access into all the garden beds. You're not avoiding trucks, that sort of thing. So we go up like a Friday night and then come back Sunday night. If I've got a few jobs to look at, then I try to tie in like a Friday or a Monday, or I'll go off my own, or it's as long as I've got the date locked in. Most clients are really happy, like they're happy to wait for us to do it. But yeah, I wouldn't be able to do constant maintenance anymore. It was a bit too hard because, jobs would be needed, and then it was raining, and yeah, so.
And what sort of percentage of your work at the moment is the design work compared to consulting and like the tree consulting?
Probably still got a fair chunk of tree consulting work. So it's probably like maybe 30% tree consulting, 20% design, 50% maintenance. And then I'm kind of, I guess, at the moment we're trying to realign our work so that I can be in the office 3 days a week and only be out doing the garden maintenance 2 days a week. And then Bill will handle those jobs on his own, or we might end up looking at getting an apprentice or employee.
Have you ever had an employee before?
I have always erred away from it. I think after 9 years working in the nursery, we're working with like nursery, landscape, wholesale, and I kind of ended up being in charge of all the staff. I think it was like at one time it's probably like 12 staff. I yeah, I don't enjoy it at all. And I've always kind of had the attitude, I want the business to be sustainable for me. You know, pre-kids, I used to love to be able to just book in a trip overseas or, you know, something like that whenever I could afford it. So I kind of just didn't want that hassle. And to be honest, I'm not good at managing staff. Like I want to be everyone's friend. I want to get along with them. And, you know, when it comes to telling the hard truths, I'm just not good at it. I don't enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm probably the same. Like and yeah, you're supposed to not treat the business as though it's your own business when you're in charge of people. You just treat it like any other business, like you would have been when you're at the nursery.
Yes.
But that's almost impossible to do when it actually is your business. So
That's
the money that they're costing is actually affecting you directly. So
yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
So I've avoided it. Phil's keen, like he's good at managing staff. So maybe if we did do it, it'd just be somebody to work with him. And I guess probably we've hesitated just because we've had coming out of COVID and then we've had really, really wet, or like a lot of Australia, we've had so much wet weather. Like at the moment, it's just chaotic because I don't think we've worked a full week due to wet weather. We've worked wherever we could around the wet weather, but almost since June or end of May, it's just been
3 or 4 months.
Yeah, and because a lot of the gardens we're working on, you've got to drive to each section, like you use the farm vehicle and you get bogged or you end up causing more damage to the ground. So yeah, and then some places we haven't been able to get access into, creeks have been flooded. So anyway.
All the joys of having your own business, eh?
Yeah, that's it. I'm sure you understand.
Well, like I've spoken to a few New South Wales people, and you certainly had a lot more rain than what anyone else has, I think.
Yeah, we probably haven't had as much as the coast, but I feel like we're starting to get more and more. So yeah, no, it's definitely been a hard juggle. Everyone's really understanding, but we've just been really delayed with all our work. I've just decided now with our landscaping, any of our planting jobs, I'm going to just cut them off at 31st of October, because I think the prediction is we're going to keep getting wet days. So I don't want to get to Christmas and not have serviced all our garden maintenance clients, plus the other work that I've already got locked in with design and tree consulting work. So
how many projects do you maintain? Like, is there a regular?
Yeah, so we've got we've built it up, I'd say, to 20 monthly clients. So that kind of covers most of the month, but then there's a few that aren't full days. So we've probably got about another 10 clients that have got smaller jobs that we tie in either on a weekend or at the end of a day. So it's sort of at the point now, I think we're almost at our limit for both of us. And yeah, some of the jobs are 2 people all day, some are 4 hours, 2 people, some might just be all day for Phil. So yeah, we're just juggling things around. I think even though I guess I've been in business since 2006, now this garden maintenance working in the country area is sort of it's not completely different, but it's a different thing to manage. Like I would probably do in Sydney, I might have done 2 4-hour jobs or 3 4-hour jobs a day, whereas here most of our work is a full day. So, and there's a fair bit of travel involved. So I guess in Sydney, you're sitting in traffic. You could be sitting in traffic for an hour, but we're driving an hour to get to usually out on a farm, to then start work. So
yeah. So when you started out with the designs, because you said that you had some past clients from the nursery, you've got the maintenance stuff to start off with, but where did the design work come from initially?
Some of them moved house and then reset up a new garden there, and then a lot of it was word of mouth and referrals from those clients. And I also did a little bit of, not much, I did a little bit of advertising, and I did a letterbox drop to, I think I had like 5,000 brochures I printed up. And I
got some?
Probably somewhere. But yeah, I've got a heap of friends and family and myself, like any spare moment, I just go and do a letterbox drop out to random streets around Sydney. So
yeah, I got some brochures made up. It would have been 7 or 8 years ago, and I've still got some in the garage.
Yeah.
So it's completely irrelevant, but don't know why I keep them, but I'm sure we're not the only ones.
Yeah. No, I'm sure I've got a box somewhere with them in it.
And how did it go when you moved to Young? How did you start drumming up business there?
So probably one of the best things I did was I offered to write a garden column for a local community newspaper, and that I still do that. So I've been doing that for 6-7 years. Every month we write and that's sort of, I guess, a different topic every month. It's only 200-300 words, but that definitely now I still get business from that. So it gets your name out into the community. I went and spoke to as many people locally in the landscape industry and garden centres, left cards everywhere. I really just tried. There wasn't as many networking opportunities down here compared to in Sydney. I think because there's more people. So I just really tried to, I guess, just get out and about, and it slowly built up. It slowly got in, sort of, people started remembering who I was, or they'd ring me up 6 months after they'd read an article and said, oh, I remembered this, and got me out to do design work. And I also started doing garden workshops just from either a local garden centre, a couple of different venues around sort of the Hilltops region, and then also here from home and out at my parents' property, which is a large garden that I've created out there. So that has been a really good way of getting your name out there in the community and advertising for that and putting posters up in all the retail shops. And
is that the one called, is it called Berkshires?
Yeah, the Berkshires. Yeah. I think, correct. Yeah, we just call it the Berkshires. It's actually a name of my dad's property that he had when he was growing up in Sydney. It was outside the outskirts of Sydney. He had a farm there called Berkshire Park, which is now a suburb of Sydney. So we just, when Mum and Dad bought the property, it needed to be renamed because it had been subdivided. So Dad chose the Berkshires. So, yeah.
Yeah, because so that features a bit on your Instagram, and there's some pretty cool things I've seen on there. Like, I love there's a water feature coming out of a retaining wall. So there's like it's almost, you could say, a moat in front of the retaining wall, and it's got taps spaced along there coming out of the walls. So did you design everything there?
Yeah, I designed everything there. So I for some reason have collected old taps for years. I don't know why. Where you go to a job and people are swapping out taps, or there was a few plumbers I used to use on jobs for my landscape projects in Sydney, and they sort of said, oh, here's a tap. Like, they knew I, for some reason, liked them. I had a box of them. And we wanted to make a little bit more interest sort of on that back wall, because you sort of walk out the back door and it's very much, that was a sort of maybe 3-4 meters off the back door, you've got that wall. So I wanted to have something that would sort of soften it, be a bit of interest and a little bit different. So lots of different ideas, and I was drawing up probably about 20 different concepts for that, and then talking to Dad about it. So Dad and I'd go for a wander and through the garden and look at it from all different angles. And we'd sort of decided on that idea to incorporate it and kind of soften the edge of the wall and make it more of a feature for the back garden of the
Yeah, certainly done that. So did you say 20 different concepts for the wall or for the whole garden?
Just for that back area. It's been a bit of a labour of love. I think probably, so Mum and Dad, when they bought the place, it was just literally a paddock with a couple of old buildings that were sort of in ruins. And they looked at trying to save the buildings and reconnect them to make a house, but it was just, every animal had lived in them, like all the door, everything. It was just a big mess. So when they built the house, I was like, well, I'm doing the garden and working with, probably talking to Dad more about it than Mum. Mum's very happy with my ideas, but Dad, he's very much a gardener, and we had lots of negotiating going back and forth. And the overall concept probably has been the same, but then the little details I've changed out and kind of brainstorming ideas for it. I think because we're going to live with it forever, or for a long time, I couldn't make it. It was really hard. It was really hard working with family and trying to make a decision on it. So
yeah. So how long have you been working on that for?
About 10 years. So probably longer than that actually. Maybe about 10 years. Yeah. So Mum and Dad had the place for a year or two before I started doing much work down there. I really wanted to kind of live with the site and get to know all the different areas, especially because it was a different climate and I was living in Sydney and just coming down on a weekend. So I really took my time with it. We just tried to get some lawn out just to kind of stop all the dust and make it a bit easier to mow. And then, it would just be about 10 years. I think last October was 10 years. So we started the planting. And then we've just done it in stages. And I'm always adding to it. And it's kind of my weekend, any spare time we have, we're up there. Fortunately, when I got to know Phil, he was really keen to come down on a weekend and he'd do all the mowing, which was a godsend.
Yeah, nice.
About 5-6 hours of mowing. So
need to get automated robot mowers out there.
Yeah, I think that's what I've been looking at. I've got a couple of clients who have them, and I'm thinking that'd be perfect for around the house because it's all flat. And that'd be great.
Yeah. And I mentioned before we started recording how I was impressed with the amount of information that you've got on your Instagram page and website. It's just a crazy amount. And people who listen to this podcast aren't all landscapers or designers. There's also just like clients, for lack of a better word. So people who are interested in landscaping and gardening. So I reckon they'll get a massive amount of value if they go to your website. But where did all that start from, providing all that information?
I guess I've always been keen to start a newsletter. And I had sort of been doing informal newsletters with the people that had attended my workshops just to try and keep in contact with them, let them know about the next upcoming workshop. And then it was sort of the beginning of COVID. I decided I needed to revamp my website. I wanted to be able to have all my information that I was putting in the newsletters. I wanted to have somewhere where there was a record of it and I could link it back, especially with social media. I can sometimes do a link back to that. So I started doing just a more formal newsletter through MailChimp and got a website developer to change my website around so I can upload the articles and everything links back to the website. So the articles are there all forever, but the newsletter is just a little summary with the latest articles, and usually they're kind of relevant to what's happening down here for the season. And you can just link through and have a look at it at any time. Different topics, there's different categories you can click on to sort of get, I guess, a summary of some of the articles. And then, you can subscribe to the newsletter on my website too. So that's built up. It's been amazing, actually. And it's all basically been from social media, from Instagram. Every month I release the newsletter, I just put a little box on, say, leave your email address here or send me your email or go to my website. And it's got up to like 800 people. So it's, and I think I've got a love-hate relationship with social media. So I try to maintain it for that. And every time I sort of think, I'm just going to stop doing as many posts or whatever, I get a client from it or I get some new subscribers. I'm like, oh no, I'll keep going.
Yeah. So what do you love about it? Just, do you love getting the work from it?
I love the work. I love like being able to post some images and I do like getting work from it because I guess we don't do a lot of advertising. It's something we probably need to get into a little bit more, but I guess it's probably since they've changed all the algorithm around in the last 2 years, it's just, I guess the number of people seeing the amount of effort you put into a post and then the number of people that the likes have gone down, the views have gone down. And I think with the amount of effort I put in, I'm kind of like, I'm sick of it.
It makes sense. But so you could either put time in instead of spending money on advertising. So you can either spend money and do it in other ways or spend your time. But if it's not working, that's sort of defeats the purpose of it, doesn't it? But it's one of those things. Like if people knew about it, I reckon it'd go insanely well. So you just got to work out how to get more people knowing about it because, so there's things you put in there like I don't know if it was what to plan or what to do in August and then what to do in September. So you do things monthly, and there's updates on the property as well, so people can follow along that and things to do. You've got a lot of information there about some fruit trees. There's just a crazy amount of information on there. I reckon it's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, I just try to do, I guess, pick a focus and focus on that for the month. And the most popular, the most hit article is always the garden tasks for the month. I find it like it's easy enough to write because I'm kind of thinking about what I'm doing in the gardens we're looking after and what I'm doing at the garden at the Berkshires. So it's easy enough to write. But then I kind of look at it and think it's not really that interesting. It's like a to-do list. So I guess I like lists, but but it's always the most hit article every month. It's always got the most number of reads. So I kept doing it. And yeah, and then I've had some really good feedback. I've been trying to showcase like the development of the garden, like how we went about doing the garden from step by step. And I'm going to end up relating that back to, I've done an ebook where I've got like a 10-step guide with designing your home garden. So I'm going to try and relate both of them together eventually over just, I don't want to saturate the newsletter with all this information with essays that, will be too long. No one's going to read them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I reckon it's great to have a to-do list for people to read because that's what they want. Like there's one thing, it's like if you're related to working out at a gym or a gym, you could look at people who have worked out and they've got these ripped bodies, which is the same as looking at an amazing landscape garden. Yeah. But people want to know how to get that. So doing that, I reckon that's why they're the most popular. They don't look like how to do it isn't the exciting part, but that's how to get to it. So
giving them that step-by-step sort of guide and it's definitely, I really enjoy doing the newsletter. It is time consuming, but again, I really enjoy using that side of my brain to be a little bit more creative with writing. And I've always enjoyed doing some form of writing ever since probably primary school, I guess, or school. Always really enjoyed creative writing. So, yeah.
And do you relate that back to the newspaper article that you do monthly as well?
Yeah, so I've really tried to become a little bit smarter with it. And so whatever I have now in my newsletter, that goes to the monthly newsletter or part of it or bits of each of them. I used to do a completely different column and I'm like, why am I doing this? So I just, pull it back. And I think I did a social media course a few years ago and it was always just rework what you have, use your content in every aspect. And that has actually saved me a lot of time. So...
yeah, that's also a good way to, like if you can't bother doing a post, you could just bring up an old one because there's, like you said, the numbers go down, so not everyone sees everything anyway.
Yes.
So, a lot of people aren't going to see it, so you can always get new views.
Definitely.
And you mentioned ebook before. You've got 3 of them out as well. So where did the idea come from to start that?
It's one thing I've always wanted to do. I've really found with my workshops, people... like I'd just do a basic set of notes with the workshops and it might just be a couple of A4 pages or a double-sided A4 page with the basic outline. And people would always say, oh, can you just send me this? Or can I have the presentation? And kind of wasn't keen about just giving my whole presentation to the people attending. And people down here especially are really keen to do their own gardens or at least be involved in some capacity. So they might get a landscape designer to come in, but then they might do a lot of the install work themselves or start doing the site prep, or we actually work with clients directly. Like we have booked in days where the client will have a day off work and they're retired and we work with them. So I was just thinking it was another way of trying to get some more information out there. It was, again, something that got developed through COVID. I've only just finished them now, but I just sort of thought, having that sort of hard copy or digital copy of an ebook with my guide to designing your home garden. It doesn't give you the nitty-gritty like design things that I've learned. Like it does give you a lot of information, but there's some things that I guess a landscape designer and their experience is going to be able to bring to a job more so than a homeowner. But that's where that came from. And but they've been well received. I haven't really promoted them much yet, so I've really got to get onto that. They've been really good feedback, and I'm doing another workshop in a couple of months' time where we'll probably focus on all 3 of them, and people attending will get, I'll print out a hard copy and they'll get a hard copy of them too. So
cool. Have you printed out any hard copies yet that you've got on your bookshelf?
I have printed out some, they're not up there, but I have printed out a couple of hard copies just to make sure it all worked okay.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, having your own books though. Yeah,
it's definitely, it's just something I've always wanted to do. Like I'd love to write a garden book one day, eventually.
Yeah. So I also saw that you received I don't know if it's a fellow of AILDM when it was called AILDM. Now it's a Landscape Design Institute.
Yes.
So because you've done a fair bit of work, you've been involved with them for a fair few years as well.
Yeah, I've actually probably, since we've moved to Young, I've had to step back a fair bit. But when I was in Sydney, as soon as I started my business, I joined ALDM, or Landscape Design Institute, as it's now called. I joined them really because it was coming from an office space where we did nursery, design, everything. There were so many people around and you're always able to bounce an idea off someone. I went from working on my own and doing the design, and I'd ring Dad up and say, can you just come over, or have a look at this. Like, I really felt really isolating working on your own. So I joined, and I'd always thought about joining ALDM. So I joined, and at the first workshop I got talked into joining the board, or at least come to a couple of meetings and see what you think. And it was fantastic sort of being involved with other designers. It means that I sort of had a whole group of people from different backgrounds doing different size jobs that you could always talk to about issues or design concepts. And then also working with students. So when I was involved, we were really keen to promote the student membership. So we had a student design comp that had already been established before I got involved, but I sort of took that on as one of my tasks to do. So we'd set a brief, and then any student across Australia could join, or could enter the competition. And yeah, that was really interesting to see and to work with students and give them feedback. And we had judges that were quite highly recognised to look at the work, give feedback and notes, and I kind of coordinated that for a couple of years. And then we also, I guess there was lots of different things we did, but we're trying to have regular workshops for people to have the networking opportunity, I think, was probably one of the biggest or the most successful things. Having people so many people do work on their own, and bringing them into a space where you can speak to industry experts, but also then after have a cup of coffee with them and chat about what's happening in your business, I think was definitely really big benefit to my business.
Yeah, I reckon that type of institute is one of the most critical to have an industry association, for that exact reason of getting people to network with each other. Because there's, landscapers usually got employees as well. So you've got someone that you're working with. It's the same with garden maintenance most of the time. There's obviously some solo operators, but there's the majority of landscape designers, I reckon, would work by themselves. So I reckon it's a great idea having that network availability. Are you still in contact with anyone? Any designers, are they sending you work now that you're not in Sydney anymore?
Actually, I still get a lot of tree work from a couple of people we're on the board with. I still do their tree consulting work. And then I think that was the other thing, is I really did find I got referral business. So because I was new to having my own business, and you sort of were involved and people could see you were interested and that you did quality work, when a lot of the more established designers had excess work, they'd refer the work to me. And that was a really, I guess, starting out in a new business was really great to pick up those really high caliber jobs and get your name out a little bit more. And I think I've always said, I was speaking to somebody the other day who was looking at joining the LDI, and I said, look, you're a new business. I know you probably don't have a lot of time, but see if you can maybe volunteer on the board or get involved with one of the different committees, because the more you put in, the more you're going to get out. And it's just a fantastic way of getting to know people. And and I'm still friends with everybody that we worked with on the board back then. We still, keep in contact, and we probably need to organise a catch up actually, but so I think it's such a great industry. I think so many people in this industry, I'm not sure what you think about this, Joel, but I don't have experience in any other industries, but I think people just have a passion for what they do, and they're happy to share. So if you're a student starting out and you have questions or you're not sure about something, I always say to people, reach out to a designer and see if they'll help you, or a horticulturalist, somebody that's working in the industry, see if they will help you out with a query or a problem. Or it's definitely I think an industry where I've always found really supportive from a young age, like from when I started first year out of high school to even now. So
I agree 100%. Like, I've only worked in hospitality and finance, but hospitality, they're maniacs because they're always partying. But But that can be said about all
some
industries.
landscape industry, yeah.
The horticulture and landscaping and designing industries is more real people, it seems like. So, and yeah, there's certainly people who compete against each other, especially in the commercial world. But domestically, it's could not be more welcoming, I reckon.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Especially these days when there's so much work around.
Well, that's what I've kind of always thought, that you like if anything, if somebody reaches out with a question, you're better to share your knowledge and help them out with something if you've made a mistake, or even like just giving them your opinion, because overall it's going to lift the whole industry up too. And I've always thought there is enough work eventually to go around to everybody. And if anything, if there's somebody there that needs a hand, then or some advice, I'm no expert on everything, but I would be happy to point somebody in the right direction, because I think it does lift the whole industry up across the board. I don't really have a lot of time for people who, and to be honest, I've only come across maybe one in 25 years of holding their cards close to the chest and, saying, well, I've made all the mistakes, you've got to make the mistakes too. Like, I just don't think that's a great attitude to have.
That's embarrassing, really, because everyone, but you wouldn't want to be like that. Like, when I help out people or give them advice, I feel good about it as well. So they're getting something, and I get a feel good feeling out of it as well.
Definitely.
And I tell my kids, but they're probably sick of hearing it, but I tell them a lot that good things happen to good people.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's all gonna
exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely.
And something I found interesting on your website. So you said you don't just work around young, but you've also done a project in New York. So how did that come about?
So I had some very good friends who got relocated over to the States, and they were I think in total they were over there for about 10 years, but halfway through that time, they decided they'd had enough of living in the city, and they'd bought a property in upstate New York. And I didn't know any of this was happening. They just rang me up one Sunday afternoon and said, how do you want to come out to America? We'll pay for your trip and your time. Come out, design the garden. I think I had about 6 weeks notice before the snow was going to hit over there. Get the garden, designed, see the site, have that all kind of, I ended up coming back and doing the design, but it was a large property, and we just broke it down and did all the measuring and got the survey done and gave them lots of advice on sort of a bit of land management, because there was a lot of native forest and there was like a natural watercourse and everything through there. So I had to do a little bit of research to work in with that climate. And we did reach out we found a couple of local experts too. So it was really interesting, and it's fantastic. And I love New York City. So I was like, yep, I'm coming. I only got to have I think I had one day in New York City on the way home, but spent the whole time in upstate New York. It's such a beautiful area. And then it snowed the day after I left. So yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you went out there for a site visit, assuming that you didn't. It was done virtually, but that's awesome that you got to go there.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And then I actually got 6 months later, I got to go back in the June, and so we had all the plans approved. We'd sort of done a bit of research about buying the plants, but I got to go back for about 10 days and do all the set out and planting. So they'd done a lot of the hardscape before I got there, and set out the garden beds, but I got to go to the nurseries, and I'm an absolute plant nerd. So yeah, got to see how they work in their nurseries over there and what they sell and source the plants, and then got to do the planting, and it was really great.
So was the survey in feet and inches that you got off them?
Yes. I don't understand. I think working in a nursery for years, because everything was back then anyway, a lot of the pots we always talked about 8 inches, 10 inches, and I could converse between a 200 ml pot and 8-inch pot, that sort of thing. But when you start talking about 400 feet, and I could never get my head around it. So I ended up I went through and just converted it. Before I started anything, I converted it all over. Yep. And then I found in my CAD program that there was a function I could use to change things. So it made it a lot easier. Yeah. I can't think in feet and inches.
No, I feel bad for people in Canada, because I think they work in both. So they'll do
Oh,
a fair bit in millimeters and meters, but also because they're close to America, they do a
yes.
bit of both. So it'd be, yeah. Well, they're using more of their brain, I suppose.
That's it, yeah. And I guess, I mean, their tape measures are so confusing too. So yeah, it's
So what would you say the climate was like upstate New York? How would you compare it to anywhere down here?
So they get pretty, I think they go down to like, they can get like a -30 wind chill factor. And yeah, so there's probably like more of an alpine region, I guess, but I don't know if we've even got, because they are under snow for 6 months, like or longer in this particular location. They're about probably 2 hours north of New York City. And yeah, I'm just trying to think. We're probably colder than any part of Australia. Maybe Tasmania in some sections, but again, they don't get the 6 months of snow. So it was, a lot of herbaceous plants and deciduous trees, and there's not many. There was a few. We did use a few evergreens. That was really interesting. Their plants are so much cheaper than what they are in Australia. So you'd get like a 2-meter tall conifer for like $80 American, and they just sold in the bare rooted sort of bagged, like almost like a root control bag, and people were just buying them by the hundreds from this place. So
did you put a sign up out the front while you're working there to try and get more work there?
No, I didn't. I should have.
And I think you've done a design in Queensland as well. Is that right?
That was, I've got 2 clients that were based in Sydney, and they bought holiday houses up on the Sunshine Coast. So that was, a really great experience too. I love working in a different climate, working in a tropical climate, but they were more, one of them I flew up and went through and did it was quite a large job. So did a complete site measure just to double check all the survey. And the other one was done virtually, but I have gone back and to have a look to see how it's all going. And I helped them select the contractor up there and select the plants. I did, on the first trip I went up, I actually went out to a few different growers that were close to Noosa on the Sunshine Coast. And so I got plant lists and I was able to chat to them and it made the job a lot easier knowing what was available quite local rather than have to worry about freight from Sydney up.
Now, was that cool using some tropical plants, something different?
It was fantastic. I really love all the different palms and so many flowering things and frangipanis and hibiscus. So it was really, really fun designing that job, both jobs.
And something else I saw was that you won a design competition with Grand Designs Live. So was that when it was the Sydney in Bloom or something, is it called?
No, it was so Sydney in Bloom was back early 2000s.
All right.
I was involved with that with the company I worked for. We did do a show garden at that. That was the garden show that they had in the Domain. It was the organisers of the Melbourne Flower Show came up to Sydney and did that for maybe 2 or 3 years. Grand Designs Live was actually all connected with the Grand Designs program, the TV shows with Peter Madden's the Australian host and Kevin McLeod's the British host. So it was like a home show. They had it in Melbourne too, I think possibly for 2 years or maybe longer. But in Sydney, they just had it for the 1 year. And they did, the year that we were involved, they had a garden. They wanted to have gardens, like show gardens built. It was all indoors. So it was a little bit different. And it was only small. They were 5 metre by 5 metre sites. But we got involved with that. I got involved. That was all that was actually part of the LDI, I keep forgetting its name. They were asked directly if you had designers who wanted to be involved with the Grand Designs Live. And so I got taught, again, I was like hesitating, and then another designer that was going to be involved said, no, we're going to do it all together. It's going to be a lot simpler. So we actually all the designs worked together in getting a sponsor for all the plants. We had Alpine Nursery sponsor for every garden. And a lot of the construction was done across with a few contractors. And I actually had Greg from Outside Space help me out with my Grand Designs garden. I think he was previously on one of your episodes back right at the beginning. And yeah, we all really worked in together. It was a really great experience. Still a competition, but you wouldn't have thought it was a competition. Like, I know the last night before opening, I was the last one to finish, and I was just doing the last lot of plants. And I had two of the other designers coming over and helping me do the mulch and helping me out with that. So it was a big effort for, I think, 4 days, but you would understand that from the Melbourne Flower Show.
Yeah. So what sort of time frame? So you had 4 days to build it, or was that how long was it open for?
Yeah, so we had to bump in over 4 days, and then it was open for 4 days, and then bump out in a day. So fortunately, with my design that I came up with, I was able to construct a lot of it off-site. So one of the other designers who also worked as a landscape contractor. He offered to help build that for me. So we built that on his site. So we did that over a number of weekends before, so we could bring it all in, bring the walls in already done, which made it a lot easier. And and then we just had to add the plants and the decking and
that is the key. It's doing as much as you can beforehand.
Yes.
And that's also a good example of how good the industry is, like the people working together like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I wouldn't have got it done without Craig. Craig from Spade Design, he was able to, I had the concept all there, but he had the space to be able to just lay out all the walls, and we could do all the painting and then build all the timber frameworks, the decks, everything. So it was full on those 4 days. You sort of think 4 days, especially being inside, and being a 5 metre by 5 metre area, we weren't, going to be held up by rain or anything. But I used every single second.
No, it's a good result though, getting a win. That's nice when you do that.
Yeah, it was a really great surprise to me. And it was really great to meet Peter Madden and Kevin McLeod and chat to them about the gardens. They really took the time to speak to every designer and get to know what the philosophy behind the garden was and how it came together. So it was a really great experience.
Did you get any work from it?
I would say probably one definite job, which was a really good job. And those clients then moved to Queensland. So I got the Queensland job from that too. So 2 jobs.
That makes it worth it.
Yes. Yeah. But I'd say, if anything, and as I think from my past experience when we were involved with Sydney and Bloom with my previous employer, I really felt like it was probably more the promotion and the networking. So getting the photographs done professionally so you can use them, and then use that for marketing, and then getting your name out again amongst other designers. And we had a lot of interior decorators, interior designers, a lot of different architects come through there. So I probably got your name out there. I don't know if I directly got any work from them, but there's definitely, I guess, that element of networking again.
Yeah, and like you said, when you're writing the articles for newspaper, like someone might contact you in 6 months or 12 months. So
that's it.
You never really know the true result. What sort of way do you plan on seeing the business in the future in terms of design and maintenance percentage wise? Like, do you plan on increasing the amount of design or just keeping it the way it is?
I think, probably if we can have a bit better balance, I would like to be able to go. At the moment, my time is I take my design work that comes to me, but I'm not out actively seeking it because I'm short of time.
Yeah.
So I think we probably do have to look at having, 1 or 2 employees in the garden maintenance side of things. It has, I guess, in the last 2 years, my business has really rejigged around with, it's sort of flipped from being more design and tree consulting to now more garden maintenance. But I enjoy both. So if I could probably stick to having at least 3 days in the office and then 2 days out in the gardens, it would be great. And then, my tree consulting work just plods along, and I really love doing that. That's more report writing. So you go out and assess the trees and then have to write a report for a council application. So if that can sort of pick up as it goes. There's not a lot of that sort of work in country areas because there's just not as many rules and regulations, but I do really enjoy that work.
Yeah. And being a plant nerd, what is your favourite plant? Or you probably have more than one, I assume.
That's really hard to narrow down.
Keep it below 10.
I would say probably if I had to pick one, it would probably have to be the Magnolia grandiflora. Just the big bird, like the natural. Not I like the cultivars too, but Magnolia grandiflora I think is just a lovely evergreen tree, beautiful flowers. Just I think that's probably would have to if I had to pick one.
Yeah,
I could probably list 20, but yeah.
Yeah, I've got a St. Mary, probably 6 of them, I think, in my backyard as a big hedge. Yeah, and they're pretty cool. I've collected the seeds and planted them up, but then didn't water the seedlings, so they died. But they're pretty easy to look after and easy to propagate as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely like the St. Marys. They're great. What's your favourite plant?
Frangipani.
Oh, yes.
Easy one. Yeah, cause my mum... so that one of my first memories of plants is my mum saying how much she loves frangipanis.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably because we're in Victoria and we can't have them. Whereas people who are in Queensland, they don't really care because they're everywhere.
Yes.
But yeah, like they do come down every now and then to Victoria when they're flowering, but then you buy them and then they won't flower again.
Yeah, I've tried to grow them 3 times here. I've tried everything, like protecting them from frost, in pots, up on a deck, under cover. Yeah, they just won't grow. So.
Yeah, I actually had one from one of the garden show I did in 2017, and so I used it in that garden, and then had it sitting on my shed, and it got treated terribly, but it kept coming back and flowering every year.
Yeah.
And then it got stolen from my shed. So.
Oh no.
But yeah, that was So there's people I've seen some flowering in Victoria, so they're usually on a north-facing brick wall,
right?
And they're better off, and they're kind of undercover as well. So they're better off being too dry than too wet because you can always add the water, but you can't take it away. They don't like getting wet feet in winter.
Yeah.
But yeah, the smell of them is just phenomenal, and they look awesome as well. So
yeah, they do. The scent is just to die for. Yes.
Yeah. But I've got a gardenia is probably a close one as well. Like I love the smell of them. I've got one of them at my back door, and I just walk outside every now and then and just smell it, looking like a weirdo, but then go back inside.
Yeah, no, I've just planted a couple here actually, and we've slowly got a little bit of a microclimate happening in our back garden. So I've found that we've been able to get some gardenias in, hoping this summer they're going to flower. And we've also got some cold climate avocados growing, which are fruiting amazingly at the moment. So yeah, so they're definitely nice to have a little, because avocado I always see as more tropical tree. So it's nice to have something with a big glossy leaf through winter when everything is quite brown looking or dormant.
Oh, something else I saw that you do a little bit of, one of the services you offer is garden coaching. So has that been popular? Because I reckon it would be, because people are kind of, when they get a design, sometimes they want to do it themselves, and some people want to look after themselves. There's obviously people who want a no maintenance garden. They just want it to look good without doing anything. But I reckon that'd be a pretty popular choice for a lot of people to get some advice on how to look after it themselves.
Yeah, it has been quite popular, and that kind of was probably another reason why I did the ebook too, because I think people do like to be that hands-on, especially when you're dealing with gardens out on farms where they're used to doing all the physical work on the farm themselves. So yeah, with garden coaching, it has been quite popular. We'll go out, work with the client, or it might just be me, go out, work with the client, talk to them about what we're going to do that day. Mainly showing them how to use what tools to use, what are the best tools to have, and rather than buying one of everything, like just a few key tools, and then showing them how to prune a hedge, how to prune, say, a salvia that needs to be cut back in winter, or dealing with ornamental grasses when they've got to get cut back. So, and a lot of the time we sort of start out like walking around when they've got a notepad and pen, and then I'm like, no, let's do this. Like, let's actually get in and do it. And most people have been really they've really enjoyed it and they've got a lot out of it. And then maybe what sometimes happens is they'll get us back once a season just to do a bit of an overall fix up of the garden, but they've been maintaining it in between. So that's been really great. So you get to go back and then see that they're using the tools that we got, like the information we gave them, to look after their garden. And yeah, and quite often I get sent photos and look what I've done here kind of thing. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I really love it. I think that's the thing, why I enjoy the workshops and kind of with ebooks too, and I really like talking about the garden and doing anything in the garden, and design too, and sort of reasons behind the way you would pull together a garden design, or why you prune a hedge at this time. And yeah, it's definitely lovely. I mean, I could chat for hours to people about it. So
yeah. And with your designs, I also saw a lot of them like they look like where they belong. And I think I might have seen you said you design for the place that they're in, like a sense of space or place, because they do have that country look about them. So is that something that you had just developed from studying, or just as you worked?
Probably, I think probably the idea of working the garden in with the architecture of the house and the existing site came from being at TAFE and learning that from our design teachers, and the importance of not just trying to pick up, one garden and use it in every single space, really trying to be not acknowledging what is there. And I guess with my arborist hat on, I really like to make sure that any significant trees are maintained and looked after. So if anything, I guess if there's any structures going into gardens, I really would try to work a design out to be away from their root zones as much as possible. And then, I guess the country look has probably come from working down here. Like my gardens that I've done in the city, and I think there's one or two on my website, probably have a similar feel, but maybe a bit more structure to them. But down here, I think I really love that sort of massed perennial, I guess, I kind of call it a contemporary country style. Like it's not all frothy and pretty all the time. It has structure in it, and the plants are selected not just for their flowers, but for their text, for the leaf color and shape and texture and size. And so I really, I guess, try to think the garden's got to look good for 12 months of the year. It can't just look good for one short period. And especially something that I've noticed this winter, like when I moved to Young, I had a couple of neighbours saying, "Oh, you won't see us through winter. We all hibernate." And I'm like, seriously? It's, coming from Sydney, it doesn't really get that cold. And then this past winter has been quite cold, and I've really noticed in the garden, like how everything has died down and is, I mean, I guess I've noticed it previously, but it's been so many gloomy grey days. The importance of having that really good structure in the garden for all the seasons is something I've really appreciated this last winter. Yeah,
I imagine being wet as well wouldn't help them in the winter.
No, I've got normal. Yeah, that's it. So we've had huge 10-year-old rosemary bushes up at the Berkshire garden, and they've just turned up the toes because they're too wet. So we're sort of, I mean, this is part of the workshop I'm going to be running in a couple of weeks' time, is looking at what can people do in their gardens, because we're seeing it in every garden we're looking after. They're now dealing with constant moisture, and we've designed these gardens, and people have selected plants in their gardens for drought. Like that's where everything has got to be frost tolerant and drought tolerant. And now we've had all this rain, it's just completely flipped the climate, or flipped the soil conditions around. So
I often say that drainage is underrated in gardens, because it's a lot easier to add water than to get rid of it. But I suppose in some country areas it's not easy to add it either.
I guess probably that was the important thing with drought tolerance. A lot of properties just don't have access to water on the farm, and if they do have water, it goes to the livestock first, or the crops. So the garden is usually the forgotten part, that if it survives, well, that's great. But so I think it's just going to be an interesting probably year or two ahead as we see what plants have survived the changing conditions and what plants haven't. And there isn't, once the garden's in and established, there's not a lot you can do with drainage. So if the drainage wasn't good in the first place, and we've got quite a heavy clay soils in this area, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
You probably wouldn't want to just go with what survives the worst part, so because then it'd be a bit boring. So just because maybe it's got to go with what you've always been using, and just be aware that it's not going to survive for as long as period. Maybe
that's it.
You don't want things to look like a commercial car park with all the same plants. And and last question for you is, who do you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast?
I would actually probably think that speaking to Steve Warner from Outhouse Design in Sydney, he was at one point when we were working together on the Alden board, he was a president, and he's based in inner city Sydney. So he does he does commercial work too, but lots of really interesting courtyard gardens and dealing with tight spaces to give clients really interesting gardens. So yeah, I'd say.
Yeah, I think I saw a commercial childcare centre that he might have won awards for. That looks phenomenal.
Yeah, Steve and his staff, Katrine is his head landscape architect, and they do really interesting work. So it's always great to see what they're doing, and they've won lots of awards.
Yeah, nice one. All right. Thank you very much, Glenice. I'll and can't recommend anyone enough to go to your website and Instagram as well. Just the amount of information on there, you could spend hours on there digesting it all. So thank you for putting that out there, and good luck with what's to come.
Thanks, Joel, and thanks for having me. And I really love listening to your podcast. So keep doing your great job on that.